I spent 3 years taking care of my dying mother. My father thanked me by giving our family home to my brother. I wish I could tell you that was the hardest moment of my life. It wasn't. The hardest moment came 5 seconds later, when I realized no one in that room thought anything was wrong. Dad smiled as he placed the old brass key into Caleb's hand. "Your mother would have wanted this," he said. Caleb nodded. Savannah squeezed his arm. No one looked at me. Not even once. I remember staring at that key and thinking about everything it had cost. 3 years. More than 1,000 mornings. Countless doctor appointments. Late-night medication alarms. Hospice visits. Cold dinners eaten after everyone else had gone to bed. I had stepped away from my own life because my mother couldn't face the end of hers alone. And somehow, none of it seemed to matter anymore. What hurt wasn't losing the house. It was discovering that my sacrifice had become invisible. Dad cleared his throat. "Well, that's settled." I almost stood up to leave. There didn't seem to be any reason to stay. The house was gone. Mom was gone. Maybe my place in this family had disappeared with her. Then a calm voice cut through the silence. "I'm afraid that isn't your decision to make." Every chair stopped moving. Every eye turned toward the attorney. Daniel Brooks had barely spoken since we arrived. Now he was standing beside a leather folder that none of us had paid much attention to. Dad frowned. "What do you mean?" Mr. Brooks didn't raise his voice. "Margaret made arrangements before she passed. They're legally binding." The room suddenly felt much smaller. Caleb slowly looked down at the key resting in his palm. For the first time that morning, he didn't look certain it belonged there. I looked at my father's face. The confidence I'd seen only seconds earlier was gone. He wasn't angry. He was confused. And that frightened him far more. At that moment, I still had no idea what Mom had done. I thought I knew every conversation we'd shared during those final 3 years. I was wrong. Somewhere between her doctor's appointments, the quiet afternoons, and the evenings when I believed she was simply resting, my mother had been protecting something. Or perhaps someone. What happened next would force every person in that room to question what they believed about love, about gratitude, and about who had truly been there when it mattered most. But to understand why an attorney interrupted my father's decision, you first need to understand the promise I made to my mother 3 years earlier. Before we go back, if this is your first time here, you'll see a small subscribe button just below this video. If it says subscribe, you can press it once. If you'd like YouTube to let you know when the next story is ready, you can also press the little bell beside it. That's completely up to you. Now, let's go back to the day my mother asked me for something that quietly changed the rest of my life. 3 years earlier, my mother asked me to stop by the house after work. She sounded tired. Not frightened. Not desperate. Just tired. When I walked through the front door, she was sitting alone in the kitchen with a cup of tea that had already gone cold. She smiled when she saw me. "I've been thinking," she said. Those 4 words changed my life more than I realized. She told me the doctors had explained what the next few years might look like. There would be treatments. Good weeks. Bad weeks. Days when she would still feel like herself. And days when getting out of bed would feel impossible. She reached across the table and gently covered my hand with hers. "I don't want strangers taking care of me if I can help it." I didn't answer right away. I already knew what she was asking. "I know you have your own life," she continued. "Your own apartment. Your own friends. I don't want you to feel obligated." That word stayed with me. Obligated. As though loving your mother could ever feel like a burden. I smiled. "When do you want me to move in?" She looked surprised. "You haven't even thought about it." "I already have." Her eyes filled with tears. Not because she wanted me to sacrifice my future. Because she knew exactly what I was choosing. Within 2 weeks, I packed everything that mattered into my SUV. A few boxes. Some clothes. Family photographs. The rest stayed behind. I told myself it would only be temporary. Just until Mom got stronger. I believed that. All of us did. Dad hugged me when I arrived with the last box. "I appreciate this, sweetheart," he said. "It'll take some pressure off all of us." At the time, those words sounded comforting. Looking back, I realized they quietly became the family plan. 1 week became 1 month. 1 month became 6. Then a year. Somehow, everyone adjusted. Mom needed help getting dressed. So I helped. She needed someone to drive her to appointments. So I drove. She forgot whether she'd taken her medication. So I kept a notebook in the kitchen and wrote down every dose. Morning. Afternoon. Evening. Every single day. Dad was still living in the house. But little by little, the responsibility shifted toward me. It happened so gradually that none of us talked about it. He still loved Mom. I never questioned that. But love and caregiving aren't always the same thing. One evening, after another long appointment at the cancer center, Mom looked out the passenger window as we pulled into the driveway. "You know," she said softly, "people think the hardest part of being sick is the pain." She smiled at me. "It isn't. It's wondering whether your illness has become someone else's whole life." I reached over and squeezed her hand. "You haven't taken my life away. You've given me more time with you." She looked at me for a long moment. Then she nodded. Neither of us realized that someone else had been watching those quiet moments far more carefully than we knew. And years later, those ordinary days would become the most important evidence anyone could ever leave behind. The first year passed so quietly that none of us noticed how much our lives had changed. Mom still insisted on making breakfast whenever she felt strong enough. She would stand at the stove for 10 minutes. Then spend the next hour resting in her favorite chair. "I used to cook for 12 people on Thanksgiving," she would laugh. Now scrambled eggs were me out. I laughed with her. But every time she smiled, I saw how hard she was working to protect us from worrying. Dad handled the bills and the yard. He drove Mom to appointments whenever I couldn't leave work early. In the beginning, we were still a team. At least that's what I believed. Caleb usually visited on Sunday afternoons. He always arrived carrying something. Fresh peaches from the farmer's market. A pie from the bakery. Sometimes flowers. Mom loved seeing him. She never measured love by the number of hours someone spent in the house. She was simply happy whenever her family was together. Savannah usually stayed for dinner. She talked about remodeling projects. Vacation plans. The promotion Caleb hoped to earn before the end of the year. Their lives were moving forward. Mine had quietly stopped moving. I wasn't jealous. Not then. I simply noticed the difference. One Sunday, Caleb patted me on the shoulder before leaving. "I don't know how you do it." I smiled. "You would." He shook his head. "No. I really wouldn't." He laughed as though he had made a harmless joke. Everyone else laughed too. Everyone except Mom. She watched my face for just a second longer than anyone else did. Later that evening, after everyone had gone home, she called me into her bedroom. "Were you hurt by what your brother said?" I shrugged. "He didn't mean anything by it." She looked out the window before answering. "Sometimes people don't mean to reveal what they truly believe." I didn't understand what she meant. Not then. The months kept passing. My notebook became thicker. Every doctor's visit filled another page. Medication schedules. Blood pressure readings. Questions for specialists. Phone numbers. Insurance paperwork. I wrote everything down because I was afraid forgetting one small detail might cost Mom a good day. One rainy Tuesday, I came home from the pharmacy carrying 3 paper bags. Dad was sitting in the living room watching television. Without taking his eyes off the screen, he asked, "Did you pick up my prescription too?" "I did. It's in the smaller bag." "Thanks." That was the whole conversation. It wasn't rude. It wasn't cruel. But something about it stayed with me. No one asked how long I'd been standing in line. No one asked whether I'd eaten lunch. Little by little, helping everyone became something people simply expected. And the strangest part was, I started expecting it too. That night, after I helped Mom settle into bed, she reached for my hand. "I need you to promise me something." I smiled. "Anything." She held my hand a little tighter than usual. "No," she whispered. "Not until you hear the whole promise." At that moment, I had no idea that one promise would eventually decide the future of our family's home. Mom didn't let go of my hand. She waited until I looked directly at her. "Promise me you won't put your life on hold because you think you owe me." I smiled. "I don't." She raised one eyebrow. "You answered too quickly." I laughed softly. "That's because it's true." She studied my face for a long moment. Mothers have a way of knowing when you're hiding something, even when everyone else believes you. "You've canceled trips." "I know." "You hardly see your friends anymore." "I know." "You work from home whenever they'll let you." "I know." Each answer became a little quieter. Finally, she sighed. "I never wanted my illness to become your whole future." I pulled my chair closer to the bed. "My future isn't disappearing. It's just different for a while." She smiled, but it wasn't the smile of someone who had been convinced. It was the smile of someone who knew the conversation wasn't finished. A few days later, I came home from the grocery store and found her sitting at the dining room table with several folders spread out in front of her. Insurance papers. Property tax statements. Old family documents. She closed one folder before I could read the title. "I'm just organizing things." That sounded reasonable. Mom had always liked keeping paperwork neat. I didn't think much about it. About a week later, she asked me another question that caught me off guard. If something happened to me. I interrupted immediately. "We're not having that conversation." "We are." She said it gently. "Because pretending doesn't change reality." I sat across from her. She reached for my hand again. Families don't usually fall apart because of money. They fall apart because people start believing different versions of the same story. I frowned. "I don't understand." "You will someday." That answer frustrated me. She had always explained everything when I was growing up. Now she seemed content to leave half her thoughts unfinished. One afternoon, while Mom was resting, the doorbell rang. A man in a navy suit introduced himself as Daniel Brooks. I'd heard his name before. He had handled legal paperwork for several families around town. "I have an appointment with Margaret." I invited him inside. Mom asked if they could have some privacy. Before closing the bedroom door, she looked back at me. "Don't worry. This is something I need to do myself." They talked for almost an hour. When Mr. Brooks finally left, he nodded politely as he passed me. Neither of them offered any explanation. I assumed they had updated a will. Maybe reviewed insurance papers. It seemed like one of those practical conversations every family eventually has. Life returned to its familiar routine. Doctor appointments. Prescription refills. Laundry. Meals. The notebook on the kitchen counter filled with another month of careful handwriting. Weeks later, while helping Mom fold blankets in the living room, she suddenly stopped and looked toward the front window. "You know what's strange?" "What?" "The people who speak the most about love." She folded another blanket. Aren't always the ones who quietly stay when life becomes difficult. I didn't answer. I wasn't sure who she meant. Looking back now, I think she already knew exactly what she was seeing. The rest of us were simply too busy living each day to notice that she had quietly begun preparing for the day she would no longer be there. The second year was harder. Not because Mom complained. She rarely did. It was because she stopped pretending she would get completely better. Hope didn't disappear. It simply changed. Instead of hoping for another healthy year, she hoped for another good afternoon. Another walk to the backyard. Another dinner with the family. Another morning when she could drink her coffee without feeling exhausted. Those became our victories. One Saturday, I helped her onto the back porch. It had become our favorite place. The old maple tree cast enough shade to keep the summer sun from feeling too strong. Mom closed her eyes and smiled. I almost forgot how birds sound this early. I laughed. They'd been singing every morning. I know. I've just been too tired to hear them. We sat there for nearly an hour without saying much. Silence never felt uncomfortable with Mom. She had taught me years ago that the people who truly love each other don't always need words. Later that afternoon, Caleb stopped by with Savannah. They brought takeout from Mom's favorite barbecue restaurant. For a little while, the house felt almost normal again. Everyone laughed. Dad told old fishing stories. Savannah showed pictures from a weekend trip to Charleston. Mom listened more than she talked. She looked happy simply watching everyone together. When they left, Caleb hugged Mom carefully. I'll come back next weekend. She smiled. I'd like that. After the front door closed, she remained standing in the hallway for several seconds. Almost as though she were listening to the silence they left behind. Then she turned toward me. You know what I noticed today? What? Everyone brought me something. The food. The flowers. The stories. She reached over and squeezed my hand. You brought yourself. At first, I didn't understand. Then she smiled. That's always been the greatest gift. A few weeks later, her doctor recommended bringing in hospice support. The word hit me harder than I expected. Hospice sounded like giving up. Mom saw the look on my face before I said a single word. This isn't about giving up. She spoke calmly as we drove home. It's about making the time we still have as good as possible. The hospice nurses became part of our routine. They were kind. Patient. Never in a hurry. One of them, Linda, always greeted Mom the same way. What adventure are we having today? Some days the adventure was walking to the mailbox. Some days it was sitting on the porch. Some days it was simply listening to Frank Sinatra while folding clean towels together. Linda noticed everything. Not just Mom's health. She noticed who prepared the medications before she arrived. Who kept the notebook updated. Who stayed awake during difficult nights. I never imagined those ordinary routines meant anything beyond caring for my mother. To me, they were simply what love looked like. One evening, after Linda packed up her bag, she paused at the front door. She looked back at Mom. Then at me. With a gentle smile, she said, "Your mother is very lucky." Mom answered before I could. "No." She looked directly at me. "I'm the grateful one." At the time, I thought those words belonged only to that quiet evening. I had no way of knowing. Someone else would remember them long after my mother was gone. By the beginning of the third year, we had stopped measuring time with calendars. We measured it by good days. Mom had a little more energy today. That was a good day. She finished half a sandwich. That was a good day. She laughed at one of Dad's old stories. That was a very good day. Those small victories became everything. One cool October afternoon, she asked me to help her into the backyard. The maple tree had already turned brilliant shades of red and gold. She looked up through the branches for a long time. "When you were little," she said, "you used to collect those leaves." "I remember. You'd bring me the prettiest ones." I smiled. I thought they were treasures. They were. She wasn't talking about the leaves anymore. Neither of us needed to say it. As winter approached, her strength faded more quickly. Some mornings she needed help sitting up. Other mornings she would apologize because she couldn't finish breakfast. "I'm slowing everyone down," she whispered one day. I knelt beside her chair. "You've spent your whole life taking care of this family. Let us take care of you now." She brushed a tear from her cheek. I raised a good daughter. A few weeks later, Linda, the hospice nurse, spoke with me quietly in the kitchen. "There may not be much time left." She said it gently, as though softer words could somehow soften the truth. I nodded. I had known it was coming. Knowing didn't make it easier. That evening, Caleb came over after work. He sat beside Mom's bed and held her hand. "I'm sorry I haven't been here more." Mom smiled. "Oh, sweetheart. This isn't a competition." She looked at both of us. "Love doesn't keep score." Those words settled over the room. Caleb lowered his head. For the first time, I saw regret in his eyes. Not guilt. Regret. Before he left, Mom asked him to hug Dad for her. When the front door closed, the house became quiet again. Just before Christmas, Mom asked me to open the top drawer of her nightstand. Inside was a small white envelope with my name written across the front. "I want you to keep this." I reached for it. She gently touched my wrist. "Don't open it yet." "When?" She smiled. "You'll know." I slipped the envelope into my purse without asking another question. Some promises don't need explanations. 2 mornings later, I woke before sunrise because I heard my name. Mom's voice was barely above a whisper. I hurried into her room. She reached for my hand. "I've had a beautiful life. You helped make it beautiful." I couldn't answer. She looked toward the window where the first light of morning was beginning to appear. Then she looked back at me one last time. "I've never been afraid of leaving. I was only afraid of leaving you without knowing how deeply you were loved." A peaceful smile crossed her face. Her breathing became slower. Then quieter. Until the room held nothing but silence. I stayed beside her long after the sun filled the bedroom. Not because I couldn't let go. Because after 3 years of never leaving her side, I didn't know how to leave the room. By that afternoon, relatives had started calling. Neighbors were bringing casseroles. The funeral home had been contacted. Everyone wanted to help. No one realized that, before the week was over, my mother's final act of love was about to change every relationship inside our family forever. The morning of Mom's service felt strangely quiet. The house was full of people. Voices drifted from room to room. Coffee brewed in the kitchen. Someone placed fresh flowers on the dining room table. Yet none of it seemed real. I kept expecting to hear Mom call my name from her bedroom. Habit is a powerful thing. Even after someone is gone. The church was filled with neighbors, old friends, and relatives I hadn't seen in years. Everyone had a story. Margaret helped me when my husband was sick. She volunteered every Christmas. She never forgot a birthday. Listening to them, I realized how many lives my mother had quietly touched. She never needed recognition. She simply believed kindness was something you practiced. After the service, people gathered in the fellowship hall. Dad accepted hugs with tired eyes. Caleb stood beside him most of the afternoon. Savannah made sure everyone had coffee and something to eat. For a few hours, we were simply a family saying goodbye. I wished the day could have ended there. Late that afternoon, after most of the guests had left, we returned to the house. The silence felt heavier than it had that morning. Dad stood in the living room and slowly looked around. Then he cleared his throat. "I've been thinking." Those words caught everyone's attention. "This house is too much for me now." No one interrupted. He looked at Caleb. "I'd like you and Savannah to move in." Caleb looked surprised. "Dad. I want the house to stay in the family." He placed a hand on Caleb's shoulder. "And someday, it'll be yours." The room became completely still. I wasn't angry. Not at first. I was simply caught off guard. 3 years earlier, I had moved into that house because my family needed me. Now, just hours after burying Mom, I was hearing plans for a future that apparently didn't include me. Dad finally looked my way. "I'm sure you'll understand." His voice wasn't unkind. It was matter of fact. "You've always been independent." I nodded slowly. "I see." That was all I said. There didn't seem to be anything else worth saying. No one mentioned the 3 years. No one mentioned the notebook still sitting on the kitchen counter. No one mentioned the sleepless nights. The doctor's appointments. The medications. The hospice visits. It was as though those years had quietly disappeared the moment Mom was gone. I walked into the kitchen to collect myself. Linda's handwritten care schedule was still attached to the refrigerator with a magnet. My grocery list was still folded beside the coffee maker. Everything looked exactly as it had the week before. Except the reason for doing any of it was gone. As I stood there, I remembered the white envelope Mom had asked me to keep. It was still inside my purse. For a moment, I almost opened it. Then I remembered her words. "Not yet." So I slipped it back into my bag. A few minutes later, the doorbell rang. Dad frowned. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened the front door, Daniel Brooks stood on the porch holding a leather briefcase. He gave me a quiet, respectful nod. "I'm sorry for your loss." Then his expression became more formal. "I believe your mother asked me to meet the family today." The room behind me fell completely silent. Daniel Brooks didn't rush to speak. He placed his briefcase on the dining room table and waited until everyone had gathered. Dad folded his arms. "I wasn't expecting legal business today." Mr. Brooks gave a respectful nod. "I understand. But your wife left very specific instructions." He opened the briefcase and removed a sealed folder. "I was asked to meet with the immediate family after the service." The room felt smaller. Caleb glanced toward Dad. Savannah quietly took a seat without saying a word. I remained standing near the kitchen doorway. I still wasn't thinking about money. I was thinking about Mom. Every sentence that mentioned her name made the loss feel new again. Mr. Brooks looked around the room before speaking. "Margaret updated her estate documents several months ago." Dad frowned. "She already had a will." "She did." Mr. Brooks answered calmly. "But she later added additional legal instructions concerning the family home." Dad looked genuinely confused. "We discussed everything." Mr. Brooks didn't argue. He simply replied. "There were some decisions your wife wished to make personally." No one spoke. The grandfather clock in the hallway suddenly sounded much louder than usual. Mr. Brooks opened the folder. Before reading anything, he looked directly at me. "Naomi." My heart skipped. "Your mother also asked me to remind you of something." I blinked. "What?" "The envelope." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Slowly, I reached into my purse. The white envelope was exactly where I had left it. My name was still written across the front in Mom's careful handwriting. Mr. Brooks nodded. "She said you would know when it was time." With trembling hands, I opened it. Inside was a single folded letter. Nothing else. No legal papers. No check. Just one page. I recognized Mom's handwriting immediately. "My dearest Naomi. If you're reading this, then I'm already at peace. Please don't be afraid of what happens next. Everything that needed to be protected has already been protected. Your only job now is to trust that I saw the truth long before anyone realized I did. I stopped reading for a moment. My vision blurred. Those words sounded exactly like her. Calm. Gentle. Certain. I continued. You never asked me for anything. Not once. You gave your time freely. You gave your strength without counting the cost. You stayed when staying was difficult. Never doubt that I noticed. I lowered the letter. Tears rolled down my face before I realized I was crying. Across the room, Caleb quietly looked at the floor. Savannah reached for his hand. Dad shifted uneasily in his chair. Mr. Brooks waited until I folded the letter again. Then he removed another document from the folder. This letter was personal. He paused. What comes next is the legal instruction your mother asked me to read aloud. Every eye in the room turned toward him. His voice remained steady. Margaret Whitfield declared that the family home should never become a reward for expectation. The sentence landed like a stone in still water. No one moved. No one interrupted. Mr. Brooks continued reading. With each sentence, I could feel something changing inside the room. Not anger. Not celebration. The quiet certainty that my mother had been preparing for this conversation long before any of us understood why. And for the very first time, Dad looked as though he realized he might not know what his wife had truly decided. I couldn't take my eyes off my mother's letter. Her words echoed in my mind. Everything that needed to be protected has already been protected. For the first time since she passed away, I felt as though she were still standing beside me. Not physically, but through every decision she had quietly made. Dad finally broke the silence. What exactly does that mean? His voice was steady, but I could hear the uncertainty beneath it. Mr. Brooks looked down at the document. It means Margaret wanted the future of this home decided by actions, not assumptions. Caleb leaned forward. I don't understand. You will. Mr. Brooks replied. He continued reading. During the final years of my life, I had the opportunity to see my family not during celebrations, but during ordinary days. Those words settled over the room. Ordinary days reveal a person's true character far more clearly than special occasions. No one moved. No one even reached for the coffee that had grown cold on the table. Mr. Brooks continued. I carefully considered every visit, every sacrifice, every kindness that expected nothing in return. I felt my throat tighten. I wasn't thinking about the house anymore. I was remembering mornings before sunrise. Medication alarms. The notebook filled with careful handwriting. The afternoons on the back porch. Conversations that no one else had heard. Across the room, Caleb slowly lowered his eyes. His shoulders sank a little. It was the first time I had ever seen my older brother look completely defenseless. Mr. Brooks reached for another page. There is also supporting documentation. Dad frowned. What documentation? The records requested by your wife. He placed several papers on the table. Hospice care notes. Care schedules. Professional observations. Linda. My mind immediately went to Linda. The hospice nurse who had quietly watched our daily routine for months. Mr. Brooks spoke calmly. Margaret wanted an independent record of her daily care. These records confirm who consistently provided transportation, medication management, meal preparation, appointment coordination, and overnight assistance. No one questioned the documents. Because everyone already knew. The papers weren't revealing a secret. They were simply recording a truth we had all lived. Dad rubbed his forehead. I never asked for any of this. No. Mr. Brooks answered gently. Margaret did. He looked toward me. She wanted gratitude to be supported by facts, not memories. That sentence struck me harder than anything else. Facts. Not memories. Memories can fade. People remember them differently. Facts remain. I suddenly understood why Mom had encouraged me to write everything in that notebook. Every appointment. Every prescription. Every change in her condition. I had believed I was only helping her doctors. She had quietly been preserving the truth. Mr. Brooks picked up the final page. The remaining instruction concerns ownership of the family residence. Every heartbeat seemed louder than the last. Dad looked at Caleb. Caleb looked at the floor. I simply sat there, still holding Mom's letter against my chest. None of us spoke. None of us knew that the next sentence would change the future of our family forever. My mother's house. Those 3 words had never sounded important to me before. It had always been home. The place where birthdays were celebrated. Where Christmas mornings began before sunrise. Where Mom somehow found room for every guest at Thanksgiving. Now it had become the center of a decision none of us expected. Mr. Brooks looked at the final page. Then he began reading. After careful thought, I direct that ownership of my interest in the family residence shall pass to the child who faithfully stood beside me throughout the hardest season of my life. The room was perfectly still. He continued. The child who remained present when there was no audience. The child who asked for nothing. The child who served with love instead of obligation. Then he looked up. That beneficiary is my daughter, Naomi Whitfield. No one spoke. I wasn't celebrating. I wasn't smiling. I was simply staring at the table, trying to understand what I had just heard. Dad was the first to react. That can't be right. His voice wasn't angry. It sounded lost. We always planned for Caleb to have this house. Mr. Brooks answered respectfully. Margaret understood those expectations. She also understood that expectations are not the same as legal instructions. Caleb slowly raised his head. His face had turned pale. I never asked Mom for the house. I know. Mr. Brooks replied. No one suggested that you did. Savannah quietly reached for Caleb's hand. Neither of them argued. Neither of them protested. The silence itself seemed heavier than any disagreement. Dad stood and walked toward the front window. For several moments, he said nothing. Finally he whispered. She never told me. Mr. Brooks closed the folder. She believed you would understand someday. Dad gave a tired laugh. I'm not sure I do. For the first time since the meeting began, I spoke. I don't want anyone to think I expected this. Everyone looked toward me. I moved here because Mom needed me. I never stayed because of this house. My voice shook. If she had left everything to Caleb, I still would have made the same choice. Those words surprised even me. But they were true. The house wasn't what mattered. The years mattered. The mornings. The quiet conversations. The ordinary moments that no one else had seen. Caleb slowly stood. He walked across the room until he was standing in front of me. For a second, neither of us knew what to say. Then he took a deep breath. You deserved every word she wrote. His voice cracked. I kept telling myself I'd visit more when work slowed down. When life became less busy. I thought there would always be more time. I looked at my brother. For the first time in years, I didn't see someone who had been given more than me. I saw a son grieving the chances he would never get back. He wrapped his arms around me. I'm sorry you carried so much by yourself. I hugged him back. You weren't the only one who lost her. Behind us, Dad quietly lowered himself into a chair. He covered his face with both hands. In that moment, I realized something. The greatest weight in the room wasn't disappointment. It was regret. And regret is something no inheritance can ever erase. The house felt different after everyone left. Not because anything had changed. Because everything had. The legal meeting was over. The paperwork had been explained. The decision was final. Yet no one rushed to pack boxes. No one argued. No one raised their voice. Instead, each of us wandered through the house carrying our own thoughts. I found Dad sitting alone on the back porch. The same porch where Mom and I had spent so many quiet afternoons. He stared at the old maple tree without saying a word. After a while, I sat beside him. Neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was honest. Finally, he sighed. I thought I was doing the right thing. I looked at him. I know. I believed giving the house to Caleb would keep the family together. His voice sounded older than I had ever heard it. I never stopped to ask whether someone had already been holding this family together. His words caught me by surprise. For years, I hadn't wanted recognition. I had only wanted Mom to feel safe. Dad turned toward me. Your mother saw things I missed. I smiled sadly. She always did. He nodded. She watched quietly. I always thought I was paying attention. Another long silence settled between us. Then he laughed softly. She beat me one last time. For the first time since the funeral, we both smiled. Not because anything felt better. Because the memory sounded exactly like Mom. Always patient. Always one step ahead. Later that evening, Caleb asked if we could talk alone. We walked slowly through the backyard where we had played as children. He stopped beside the maple tree. I've been thinking about those 3 years. So have I. He shook his head. No. I've been replaying every Sunday visit. I kept telling myself you had everything under control. I convinced myself that meant you didn't need help. He looked down at the grass. I was wrong. I didn't answer immediately. There was nothing to gain from making him feel worse. We all make choices with the understanding we have at the time. He looked at me. Will you ever forgive me? I thought about the question carefully. Forgiveness isn't something you give because time has passed. It's something you choose when holding on to resentment no longer serves any purpose. I don't want to spend the rest of my life measuring what each of us failed to do. I'd rather remember what Mom taught us. He waited. Love isn't proven by perfect decisions. It's proven by what we choose after realizing we've made imperfect ones. His eyes filled with tears. He nodded once. I'd like to do better. I believe you will. A few days later, Dad called another family meeting. This time there were no lawyers. No folders. No legal documents. Only family. He looked at each of us before speaking. I can't change the past. But I can choose how we move forward. For the first time since Mom's passing, it felt as though our family wasn't being divided by her final decision. We were finally beginning to understand why she had made it. A month after everything was settled, I stood alone on the back porch with a cup of coffee. The maple tree was beginning to bloom again. Another season had arrived. Life had done what it always does. It kept moving. For a long time, I believed the greatest gift my mother left me was this house. I was wrong. The house was only wood. Brick. Windows. A roof. What she truly left behind was something no document could ever transfer. She left the truth. A truth that could never again be rewritten by memory. Dad decided to stay in the house for as long as he wanted. Nothing about that changed. I wouldn't have wanted it any other way. It was still his home. It had always been theirs together. Caleb and Savannah found a place only a few miles away. They visited often. Not because they felt obligated. Because they wanted to. Slowly, our Sunday dinners returned. Not exactly the way they had been before. Some chairs would always remain empty. Some voices would always be missing. But laughter found its way back into the house. Little by little. One evening, Dad surprised all of us. He walked into the kitchen carrying my old notebook. The same notebook that had traveled with me through doctor's appointments, medication schedules, and countless sleepless nights. He placed it gently on the table. I finally read it. I looked at him in surprise. I wasn't sure I should. He smiled sadly. But I needed to understand. He rested his hand on the worn cover. I thought I knew everything your mother went through. I didn't. Then he looked directly at me. And I certainly didn't understand everything you carried. Those words meant more to me than the house ever could. Not because I needed an apology. Because I knew he truly saw me. For the first time. Weeks later, I placed Mom's letter inside the notebook. They belonged together. One recorded the practical details of caring for someone you love. The other explained why those ordinary moments mattered. Neither was written for recognition. Both were written from love. Sometimes people ask what inheritance means. They imagine bank accounts. Property. Family treasures passed from one generation to the next. But I've learned that the most valuable inheritance isn't something you receive. It's the examples someone leaves behind. My mother never rewarded me for taking care of her. She simply refused to let quiet faithfulness disappear into silence. She made sure the truth would still have a voice after hers was gone. I still miss her every single day. Sometimes I catch myself reaching for the phone before remembering she won't answer. Sometimes I hear a song she loved and smile without realizing it. Grief never completely leaves. It simply learns to walk beside gratitude. And every spring, when the maple tree begins to bloom again, I remember what she taught me without ever saying the words out loud. Real love isn't measured by promises spoken in comfortable moments. It's measured by who quietly remains when life becomes difficult. If you were in Margaret's position, would you have made the same decision, or would you have divided everything equally regardless of what each person had done? And if this story touched you, you're welcome to like, share, or subscribe so you won't miss future stories.